Okay, great. It is 1979. My dad is 24 years old, married to a beautiful woman with a newborn baby, living in the outskirts of central Vietnam, along the beaches. Many people in Vietnam were becoming refugees, as the communists were enlisting men as soldiers for war. It was considered a death sentence, as many of these men did not come back alive. The choices were simple: enlist or refuse to be and be in prison. If you dare even attempt or even plot to escape Vietnam, it would be considered treason and you will be prosecuted. Knowing these odds, my father was still determined to find a way out. He did not want to die in the hands of the communists, so his friend approached him one day with a plan. He has been promised enough money by a local doctor to buy a boat. The boat, big enough to fit a dozen people, that would free them from being enlisted as soldiers. The plan was simple. All my dad had to do was meet him at the shore at midnight, and they'll be on their way. The night came, and my dad waited. 2 hours passed, and still no sight of his friend. No boat in sight. After some time, he headed back home. The next day, my father was arrested. His friend, who purchased the boat, had been prosecuted and imprisoned for 5 years, while my father was let off easy. He was prosecuted and put in a chamber for several hours. The chamber filled with large needles coming from the ground and also from the top. The only way he had to avoid this was to remain in a squatting position, right, to avoid any harm. Luckily, he was healthy enough and left with no harm. He remained in jail for several days. He had been released and prohibited from engaging in any kind of work. Unable to provide for his wife and newborn, my dad decided to take his family south. He took part of a government program where land was given to anyone interested in living in remote areas. It was a struggle, farming corn, tobacco leaves, and raising livestock. Very few people were living in these areas, and resources were scarce. He had 2 acres, pigs, chickens, and even a pet dog. Food was on the table now, things were getting better, and my mom even had another baby. After a year and a half, my father had raised enough money to send my mom and kids back to their village. Off on the train they go. My dad stayed back to continue to farm. After a couple months, he received a mail from my mom. It was a letter. The letter read that 3 of his brothers successfully escaped Vietnam, and they were residing in a refugee camp in Hong Kong. The letter also read that his wife would not return back to the farm and instead remain in their village, as directed by my grandfather. The reason being is that my grandfather wanted to ensure my father did not try to escape Vietnam again. He was really concerned that my dad would get caught and prosecuted. This left my dad with no choice. He had to leave his new life behind. For just enough money for a train ticket, he traded his 2 acres, 2 pigs, 10 chickens, and a pet dog. He arrived back to his village. He felt hopeless, became miserable. The reason being, my grandfather was watching him very carefully, put him under house arrest to ensure he did not try to plot and escape. It was already tough with the communist police basically securing the entire village. He was unable to provide and work for his family, unable to roam the village. His wife began working in the marketplace to raise money to feed his family. It's now 1982. Mail arrives from his brothers. It's a letter attached with it, some money. The letter reads, they'll be arriving into the land of opportunity very soon as they take immigration to the United States. The letter also read that my dad should stay back in Vietnam as it's getting more and more difficult to escape. The consequences were becoming far more severe as officers were given the authority to kill on sight. If you even speak about escaping Vietnam, the penalty is now 10 years in prison. The stakes were very high. This brings my father into further misery and a feeling of hopelessness. No freedom to even leave sight of my grandfather. Everyone in his village knew of his prior attempt, so he shaved his head. He shaved his kids' heads. He rebelled to my grandfather. At first, he acted as if he lost his mind to both his wife, his family. So my grandfather started to back off, give him more freedom. This gave him even more ideas. He started to roam the village as if he was crazy. The officers would just write him off. Yeah, he's just crazy. Just let him walk the streets. But it allowed him to explore the border beaches and allow him to roam the villages freely so he can plot a plan. After several weeks, a retired soldier approached him. He was served the communists for 40 years. The retired officer felt a lot of sympathy for my father. He was unable to provide for his family, so he brought my father into the local police station. And he convinced the police officers to grant him 2 months of a temporary fishing license. And he would have to check in every single week in order to continue to fish. So he found employment with his new fishing license from a fisherman who owned a very large boat. The engine was state-of-the-art, brand new. Every single day he woke up, took this opportunity as his last, took the job very seriously. A month had gone by, and he became very familiar with the system. As you leave the shore on the boat, you had to drive up to a gate. Every time you hit the gate, you have to verify each fisherman's fishing license. After a search and verification by the officer, they're able to pass the gate. If they try to pass the gate without any verification, the boat will be shot down. So he was very familiar with the system. He continued to fish day by day, checking to the police station every week. He had only 1 week remaining on his fishing license. His window of opportunity was closing on him. He had to come back with a plan, or else he would have to go back to his prideless life. Before he knew it, his boss approached him, the owner of the boat. His boss said, "My son has been enlisted as a soldier to fight for the communists in Cambodia. I will give you this boat if you take with him and escape Vietnam." He's got a boat. Great. So important, this information remains confidential. If he brings it up to the fisherman, that risks his entire operation and his life. He didn't even tell his own wife. On the night prior to his fishing license expiry, he engaged a trusted friend and the owner of another boat. His trusted friend was to gather villagers to escape Vietnam. The only condition is that he has to bring my dad's family to the spot where they will be picked up as well, and they will meet at sunrise. My father went to work as if it was just another day. His boss, not present. Instead, his son was working for him that day. His boss went out on vacation. He went south to visit some relatives. The rest of the fishermen all ready to fish like it's another day. Off the shore they go, going through their regular routine check through the gates. As they approached the gates, my dad started to get nervous. The officer looked at him and reminded him, "This is your last day, and you will no longer have any work." Aware of this, he nodded. That's all he did. They continued to offshore. As planned, my father switched with the son of the boss. He was now controlling the boat. He steered it far enough from the shore and close enough to a familiar boat, and he stopped the engine. Everyone prepared to anchor the boat and started to begin fishing. Instead, my father pulled off 2 machetes. He's hijacking the boat. He said to the fishermen, "If you are not leaving with me to escape Vietnam today, you can go to the other boat. If you try to stop me, I will kill you." The men are extremely conflicted. They're staring at a very small guy, completely bald with 2 machetes. And they too want to escape Vietnam, but they fear prosecution for not only themselves, but for their family. Most importantly, they're scared of my dad. So they all jumped to the other boat. The boat now vacant of the other fishermen. Him and the son of the boss just left in the boat. The fight was not over. My dad, clearly aware of the situation. The fishermen that left the boat, they have an obligation to report to the officers that my father is trying to escape Vietnam, or else they would be considered assisting treason. Time was of essence. He quickly rushed to the pickup spot, ashore on the other side of town. The communists did not occupy the area. The reason why he knew this, it was an area he was familiar with when he was a madman. He did not communicate any of this to his wife. His family did not even know this. But as he drove closer, he seen. His first son was held in the sky with 2 arms by his trusted friend. And there they docked. He embraced his family in the arms as they boarded on the boat. His trusted friend gathered 28 people for a total of 31 people. The escape was not over. The limited food and supply and gas typically makes boaters escaping Vietnam up to a month to get to the Hong Kong refugee camp. They typically take a route that's along the shores to make sure they can dock and also beg for food, gas, and water. But instead, my dad, with his brand new boat, state-of-the-art engine, he begged for food and gas along the way on a direct route from other boaters. He took only 3 days and 3 nights to get to Hong Kong. 31 people escaped Vietnam. 31 people. 31 people immigrated to Australia, across USA, Canada, and are given the opportunity to live more freely in a democratic society with higher standards of living, more opportunities for education, and their kids and generations after them are able to afford more opportunity because of my dad. Thank you, Dad, for being your courageous self.